Hello, everyone. Glad to have you here, guys, with us. Thank you all for joining, and welcome again to this month's Dr. Jaspersoft session. As you can see from our slide, today we'll be talking about a very hot topic that we had a lot of requests for, Jaspersoft upgrade best practices. I am Badr Draifi, your Dr. Jaspersoft host. We have here with us today our presenter, and actually previous Dr. Jaspersoft host, Mike Belkowitz, manager of Jaspersoft Customer Success Americas. Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
Good, better. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for joining us and be our guest speaker for this amazing session, Jaspersoft Upgrade Best Practices. If you can please move to the next slide.
Sure.
Here you go. So stay tuned, guys, for our next session on May 11th. So we'll be talking about optimizing analytics and reporting with JasperReports IU. We're going to shift the focus to JasperReports IU a little bit this time, and we're going to have some use cases also on how to use it with ChatGPT. So yeah, please, guys, just put your question on the comment section in the right of the YouTube stream. We will be monitoring it, and we'll try to get to all of your questions before the end of the session. Mike, you have the floor now. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Badr. It's great to be back, man. It's been a while. So yeah, real quick, just high level, here's our agenda today. I'm going to do a quick little slide on why you should be upgrading. We're going to then go over a couple of upgrade options and how to plan and talk about the basic upgrades, and then our recommended approach from customer success, and then tips and tricks that we're going to give to hopefully make your upgrades go smoother. So we'll jump right in. Why upgrade? You don't want to get left in the dust. Simple as that. Obviously, we release new features with almost every release that we put out. You don't want to miss out on those new features. Defects that are addressed, we do release hot fixes in between our major upgrades, and those are always rolled up into our next releases. So you always want to get those all those defects addressed that you may have been found in the previous versions. User interface enhancements. Obviously, we change the look and feel over time, and you want to make sure to not miss out on some of those features. Not always the entire website or the entire application, but sometimes just specific components. So you don't want to miss out on those enhancements. One of the ones closest to my heart, of course, the performance improvements. Obviously, new versions usually come with better performance. We hope that's our goal. We try to improve the performance of the system with every release that we make. And maybe most importantly, you want to be able to get that continued support. We recently, with the 8 versions, started doing this long-term support release versus mainstream releases. As of the recording of this session, our current long-term support release is 8.0.3. Our current mainstream release is 8.1.1. More info about that is in the link there that's provided on the slide, which will be made available to you after the session. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on that component.
Yes, Mike, this is a really good thing to mention the long-term support and mainstream release. And we have a lot of content about that. You can go to the link there or YouTube. Yeah, we did a user session, actually, conference call from the support team. We were talked a lot in details about the difference between our support releases. And also I want to mention in the continued support, be aware that whenever we release a new version, we also support new platforms, third-party platforms that get used with Jaspersoft, like database servers, application servers, operating systems, and so on. So if you guys like wondering or wanting to upgrade to a new application server or something, upgrading Jasper server will allow you that. And if you go to our platform supported document, you will see all the new supported platform that we have for each version.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Badr. That's a great point. And sometimes those performance improvements that I mentioned, you get performance improvements obviously with better app servers and newer versions of Java, let's say, and all that stuff as well. So great point. Thanks for that, Badr.
Sure.
All right, so real quick, let's talk about your upgrade options and your first step. Your first step with any upgrade that you're going to do in Jaspersoft is to plan. It's really important. I know it sounds obvious, but a lot of people just go in thinking, oh, I'm going to download this and do this and do this, and I'm done. But it's really important to plan your upgrade. One of the first things you want to do is take note of any of the key sort of major changes to Jasper since your version that's out there. I have a quick little list here as of 8.1. I always recommend you check the upgrade guide. There's a section there for planning your upgrade, and it lists each release that we've put in back to many, many years, and what the major things are in there that might affect your upgrade. Some of the things we've seen as far back as 7.5, but does get some changes throughout all the versions, is the key store files, how we handle the key store files and the encryption keys. We'll talk about that when we get to our recommended approach a little bit later on. Another one is that we used to use phantom.js to do some exports of reports and stuff, and we've replaced that now with Chromium. So you want to make sure that you're addressing that when you come up to the later versions. We do have a new architecture around our audit database. You can stick with the old architecture. We call it a compact architecture, and that's where the audit database shares the same database as your Jaspersoft repository. But now we give you a new option as of 8.1 that allows you to split that audit database to its own database, either on a different server or the same database server that you're using, hopefully to improve the performance around audit if you do choose to use that feature. There are special cases involved when you're upgrading if you're going to go from a compact installation to a split audit database. So just make sure you read the upgrade guide for more details about how to make sure that happens. And of course, theme changes. So I talked about user interface changes before. Generally, that's along the lines of our themes, but you want to make sure you're not miss out. Sometimes we make changes to the overall theme and overall look and feel of the application, and that's done in the themes usually. Another thing in your planning step should be the timing. When do you want to do your upgrade, and how much time do you think it's going to take? A lot of people ask, how long should it take to do an upgrade? We don't know. It depends on your installation, depends on your customizations, it depends on how you're using the system, how much data you have in the system, a lot of factors. But a very base level upgrade is actually fairly quick, right? Just to upgrade a base level Jasper, a really not super heavily used system, it's a pretty quick process. But the level and the quantity of customizations that you might have can obviously increase the time required. Some of the other components based on, like I said, how much data you have in your repository can also affect the overall timing. And then really important is to always back up your database and your install directories before you start any upgrade procedure. When I talk about install directories, I mean in your app server, you usually have, like by default, it's called Jasper Server Pro if you're in the commercial edition. I think it's just Jasper Server if you're in the community edition. You want to back those directories up no matter what you do, because that way it just makes your life a lot easier when you want to roll back if you have any issues during your upgrade.
Yeah, sorry guys. Sorry about that. I also want to mention here on the timing parts, on the level quantity of customizations. You need to be aware, guys, that when you move to a new version, maybe some of the customizations that you have are already released as official features, so you don't gonna need them anymore. So please go ahead and check the release note. It's always published with the new version in our documentation, and see in the release note if we actually added the feature that we added. It's something like exactly what you're doing as a customization, and this way you don't have to upgrade that customization to the new version as well. So this is less work for you, and it's preferable to use the official release feature than your customized one.
Yep. Yeah. We talked about report bursting. That's another one that just got released.
Exactly.
And a lot of people had a customized version of that before, but now they can get rid of that and just use our built-in report bursting. So good call out, Badr. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so real quick, just going to touch on basic upgrades. This is for what I call the uncomplicated installations of Jasper. Obviously, refer to the upgrade guide. Inside that guide, these steps that I'm outlining for you right now are defined and documented very well. One of those is the overlay upgrade. That is something that you can do, but only with very specific situations and previous versions. You can't do it with really old versions. You have to have a minimum version there, and it can be very like I said, it's very specific, doesn't work for a lot of cases. It's not something we actually do a whole lot in customer success, but it is out there and available to you. The second one is what I call the script-based upgrade. We ship with the product a couple of scripts: JS upgrade same DB, JS upgrade new DB. Which script you have to use is based on a sort of a grid of which version you're coming from, which version you're going to. There's a chart provided in the upgrade guide that actually shows you which script you will actually utilize. And as part of that, you can just follow the instructions, like I said, in the guide, the upgrade guide. It's a very similar to doing a WAR file sort of installation, similar to the method, the approved or recommended approach, excuse me, that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But it comes with some automatic scripts there. We prefer our approach because it gives you a lot more control over the actual upgrade when it comes to steps, and it's easier to roll back, and you'll see about that here soon. Okay, so now we're going to jump right into the advanced, what we're calling the advanced upgrade use cases, for those more advanced or customized installations of Jaspersoft. This is sort of what we consider the recommended approach. It's the approach we follow the most, I'd say, in customer success. It's really nice on a couple of levels. It may sound a little complex, but we will do a little demo for you after we go through a couple slides here. But basically, from a high level, it can be done from any prior version. Sometimes you can even do it without the version hop. That's what I call the suggestion in the upgrade guide that says if you're on a really old version, you have to go to version X, and then version Y, and then finally up to 8.1 or whatever your current version is. So sometimes you can actually skip that hop altogether, depending on what your what components of the application you're actually utilizing. Some more advanced things or complex things or things that we've just changed may require that, but you'll discover that during this process. To us, this is the easiest method to sort of roll back, because really you're just installing a whole nother server in parallel to your existing running server. So if you have any issues, you don't have to worry about actually rolling back stuff. You can actually reapply and start doing reinstall whatever you need to do separate from affecting your current production environment. Which makes it really nice. It does obviously accommodate customizations and or configuration changes. I'll talk about that a little bit, but it does also, maybe a slight drawback, requires a quote fresh installation of JRS. And so you do have to, there are some additional memory requirements, some physical server space you're going to need to do that. But it does also allow you for easy upgrade of those third-party applications. So things like the app servers, Java, et cetera, things we talked about before and why you would upgrade. So if you want to upgrade to the latest version of Java that we support, or Tomcat or whatever, you can do that in parallel with this process, which makes it nice. All right, so let's jump into the actual process behind this recommended approach. So the first step is to install your new instance with your new repository database. So when you go through the installation process, you're going to install using the WAR file installation, not the bundled installer. We always recommend the WAR file installation for prod environments, but you're going to install it as if you're installing a brand new one. The one change that I always make to the default master properties file, which identifies where your database is, what the connection info is, where your app server is I rename that database from that default Jasper server, and I always append the version number that I'm upgrading to. So if I was going to 803, I would put 803 here. If I'm going to 811, which I'll be doing in my demo, I will use 811 there. And that way I know when I look at the database which version I'm using in for Jaspersoft. Another component which isn't totally required or mandatory is, but something we like to do, is to add a keystore.init.properties file to your Build-O-Matic directory, which allows you to specify where you want to store your Jaspersoft key files, your key store files. So the JRKS and JRKSP files that are required to do the encryption and stuff that happens behind the scenes in Jaspersoft. So we're going to add that file. I'll show you how to do that real quick. Very easy, just 2 lines in that file. Then the next step is to actually export everything from your old server. Now there's some debate as to when the best time is to do this step. I like to do an initial one at the beginning, which allows me to grab that data and test the data with my first kind of go at the server. And then eventually when I'm ready to actually do the flip the switch, I'll do another export later. And we'll talk about that in a moment. While it's generally recommended to shut down JasperReports Server, you can usually keep it open and running if you're confident that your repository is not too large or complex. If you've been doing regular exports over time, and you know that your exports handle just fine every night, let's say, or whatever, however often you're doing that, then go ahead and just do the export here. You can do it with it running, so it won't affect your servers and minimize that downtime for your end users. Then the next step will be to import everything from that old server into the new instance. And you're going to smoke test and then just do a quick test looking at reports and a few things that you know are kind of unique to your system. Make sure that it still works. If you have issues at that time, if you're finding problems with, say, your ad hoc views or whatever, and you're coming from this much older version, then you might consider that jump, the hop that we talked about before. And again, see your upgrade guide for recommendations on what levels to go to. All right, the next step after you've got that initial smoke test done is you go ahead and do the hard part, in my opinion, sometimes the hard part, re-implementing any sort of customizations or configuration changes that you might have had in place with your old version. So now's the time to actually take those and customizations and try to implement them to the new version. Sometimes it's as easy as copying files over, but not usually. A lot of times you got to merge those files into files because those files have changed on the Jasper side. So you got to merge in those changes there. It really depends. And a really good point as well would be to make sure that whatever thing you've customized isn't already implemented into the new version of Jasper as a new feature. And if that's the case, then you can look at taking out your customization. Once you re-implement those customizations, you'll probably have to bounce the server, of course, and then smoke test your server and make sure everything works once again. And then we're ready. Once we're ready, we do this, you time this part right, you're ready to actually move everyone from the old instance to the new instance. You go ahead and shut down the old server when you're ready to flip. And while it's shut down, perform that final full export of all your old data and import it into the new instance. This way, you're guaranteeing you've got the latest data from your production server. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, once again, you always should back up your database and your installation directories before starting any upgrade procedure, including this one. This method is very nice and fairly fail-safe because you're not touching the old database necessarily, but you never know, and you might mess something up in the configurations. So it's always a good idea to back it up if you haven't recently. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump over, before we get into tips and tricks, we're going to jump over to a quick demo. And I'm going to show you, I've actually outlined here some upgrade steps that I just wrote, just notes for myself when I was building the demo. And guess what? This is my plan. This is the part we're stressing at the beginning. You really need to plan your upgrade. And here are the kind of the steps that I'm going to go through right now and show you how this works. So the first thing I'm going to do is export everything from 803. But I do have that running right now. So what I'm going to do is, before I do the export, is I'm actually going to show you. This here is my 803 server of Jasper. And I just want to show that I have a report here. I made a Dr. Jasper report, very basic. It's based on an ad hoc view of some of our sample data. And it just shows a list of some information here from the Supermart sample database, some names and salaries. So we just want to show this. So we have a test point, and we will export everything and then test this report when we get to the 8.1 version of the server. So that's up and running right now. So the first thing I'm going to do now is go ahead and do an export. I'm going to go ahead and shut down my 803 server, which is running on another screen. And I'm going to go over here to my Build-O-Matic directory for the previous server, the 803 bin directory. This is important that, hopefully when you made your installation was done previously. They had left the Build-O-Matic directories there because your import and export scripts are there, but also your default master properties file, which points to the right servers and all that stuff, should all be there and give us the ability to do this JS export. If it's not there, that's a little bit more of a challenge. You'll have to actually download and get the bin directory. We've sort of recreated, and you have to recreate your default master properties file to ensure you can do this kind of a step here on the command line. And real quick, let's walk through what I'm exporting in these options here. I don't know if it's easier to see up above or below, but basically I'm choosing to export everything. I'm choosing my output zip file. I named it everything export 803. I'm making sure to include my profile attributes.
Maybe Mike, you can make it a little bit bigger for the
yeah,
audience.
is it
yeah, it's a little bit smaller.
Yeah, where's the
Here you go.
How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, that's way better.
So thanks, Batter. Yeah, so again, everything output zip to everything export 803.zip. Choosing to include my attributes, that's your profile attributes. So if you have profile attributes on users, you might want to make sure you include that option. And then this is a special option. It's not really documented very well, but this option here is our key alias option, which tells the system basically that we'll be key agnostic and be able to use this data with a different key when we upgrade to a new server. So that's
and just be careful if you're coming from a version prior to 7.5, you're not going to use this key alias. If you're not gonna work JS export because it does not know this key alias, but you're gonna have to use it in the import. So Michael will show you this, but yeah, be careful if you're coming from pre 7.5, you don't use key alias in the export.
That's right. The key files will just get generated fresh, and the system will encrypt everything the first time when you go from those old versions. So I'm going to go ahead and run that command, and that essentially is going to run a little a mini VM of Jasper, and then export the data that we want. So we'll wait here.
Yeah, it's really important that Buildomatic, the note that Mike said before, you need to make sure that your Buildomatic is properly configured and is pointing to the right database and the right key stores before executing any scripts inside the Buildomatic.
Yeah, and you'll see the errors. It'll usually do a build failed right away if something's not configured right, or if it can't connect to your database or whatever. Just read the errors. You will see some false positives, false negatives, I'll say there as well. But if you see build successful, then you're usually in pretty good shape. So you can see now it's exporting all the actual data from my 803 repository, and it created a nice little zip file called everything export 803.zip. All right, so we go back to our steps here, and now we're going to basically install the new version, 8.1.1. So what I've downloaded already is the bin war file distribution, the bin file, from the eDelivery site, and that needs to be unzipped now into a bin directory. I went ahead and did that already. So here's what the bin zip looks like. Usually about 1 gigabyte in size nowadays. That's what our bin, that's how you know you're getting the right one. Get a nice big boy there. And then you're going to go ahead and unzip that whole thing. I always put it into a folder. It likes to make a nice long folder name, but Windows sometimes has issues with long paths. And so and there's a lot of files within that structure. So I renamed the directories. As you can see here, you can do whatever you want, just as long as you know what they are moving forward. So inside this fresh unzip of the bin directory, I did add 2 other files here. These are files that I had pulled previously from other installations or this installation, and I've tweaked them specific for this install that we're going to do, and we'll walk through those files right now. The first one I'm going to go through is the key store init property file. And this file, like I said, if it won't exist, you'll want to create this file. And you only need 2 lines in this file, a KS equals and a KSP equals. And that's going to just tell Jaspersoft during the install where we're going to store the key files, the key store files, the Jaspersoft key store files. If they don't exist there, it's going to create them there. And if they do, then that means you had them from somewhere else. You shouldn't have them there with a fresh install, of course, because it's the first time you're doing it. So as you see here, I'm in my user directory. I created a folder called Jasper Keys, and then I have a folder for every version. That's how I store my key store files. You guys have your own company requirements. Make sure you keep note of that. It's very important to manage and maintain those key store files.
Yeah, so we're not going to go through all the steps for the installation of Jaspersoft. You do have documentation for all of that in our documentation center, and we can do another Dr. Jaspersoft session about it later. But this is important steps to know during the install. Is the KStore init property is not mandatory, but it's still better to do so you can control where Jasper Server will save the KStores, its own KStores. This is really important. And you're gonna have to make sure that the user who is installing Jaspersoft is the user who's running Jaspersoft, or at least they have the same privileges. So you don't have any right access issues. Something that we deal a lot with a lot of our customers. Sometimes they use root, or they use user with install different than the user with running, and they face a lot of issues based on access, that the JasperReports server cannot access KStores, cannot access some other files, and yeah, so
Yeah,
it's always recommended to use the same.
Linux boxes, people tend to do it as root all the time. We don't recommend that. Use a Tomcat user, use a specific user for the app server, but whoever you do use, make sure the permissions are the same throughout. That's what Batter's saying. And that includes the keystore file access and your Jasper directories and install directories. So
yeah, and that KStore init properties is a file that you can create by yourself, but the default master properties, as mentioned in the installation guides, I highly recommend you to take a look at it, is a copy of a Postgres master properties or MySQL master properties that exist in the Buildomatic, that you can just copy the content and put it inside the default master
I'll
property.
show that here in a minute here, Batter. So first I'm going to copy this keystore init properties file into my Buildomatic directory. So make sure that that got in there. Here it is. And then I'm going to take a look at that default master properties file. Like Batter says, if you go into the Buildomatic sample conf, we ship with these 5 right here. These are our supported repository databases. So you can use one of these as a basis for your default master properties file. Again, that's outlined in the install guide. So we're not going to spend any more time on that. However, we are going to take a look at the default master properties file just to confirm a couple of key changes. I've pointed this to my Tomcat directory for Jasper 811. That's one change I've made in here. And then the other one I mentioned, I'm going to set my database names to have an 811 at the end, so I know when I'm looking at my database which version of Jasper I've deployed to. Those are the main things there. This is your compact versus split audit stuff that's in there as well now, new in 8, but those are your basic information that you have to change. Obviously, you'll have your database connection info as well. So that's my default master properties file. I'm going to go ahead and copy that into Buildomatic as well. Just make sure that that got put in. It did. There's my file from today. And now I'm ready, I believe, to do my install. So I'm going to go ahead, and if you've done an attempt at an install before and it failed, you want to make sure to clean out your install directory and make sure that it's nice and empty. So just has Tomcat in it without the Jasper Server Pro directory. So so mine is clean. So I'm going to go ahead and run an install now from that same Buildomatic in JRS 811, not 803. So you got to be very careful when you're doing this, because you don't want to accidentally rerun an install for an old version that you're working on. So be very careful when you run these commands. And that's also why you're going to be backing everything up. So I'm going to run JS install. And now we're going to wait. If you had done it, another thing to point out is if you had done it and the database was created, you're going to get a warning, a message saying, hey, the database already exists. You want to drop it and recreate it. That's up to you. I tend to do it just to get a nice fresh one each time, just to make sure. So it's kind of up to you, but I usually recommend go ahead and dropping and recreating it, especially for the Jasper Server one. Sample ones, not so much. And okay, now as you can see, the build was successful. We were able to get everything installed, so we should have an 811 version. So our next step is to actually import the 803 export that we had created previously, and we're going to import that into our new 811 instance. So I'm going to go here, but I have to update the path because it's in a different location. It's in my JRS 803 bin Buildomatic. And you can see here, it's really important that you include skip themes here, because that export that you did before of everything included the themes from your old 803 version. And if we've changed our themes, they can conflict, or basically you'll be missing out on features. Some things may not work right. So you want to ensure that you skip the themes when you import from your old version into your current version. And that way you'll keep the latest themes, but you'll have all the underlying data underneath it. Again, we're going to pass that key alias command, same one we did, or flag that we did before. And we're going to, just for good measure, throw up the -- update. In theory, with a fresh install, probably isn't much to actually update, but sometimes there are key things there as far as users and basic roles. If you've made changes, that will make sure everything's updated properly. So I've got that import here. I'm going to go ahead and run that, and we'll let that chug. All right, and now we have completed our import of the export from 803 into 811. And in the meantime, I also fired up my 811 server. Now remember, I had to shut down my 803 server because when I work locally, I only can do one server at a time because it shares the same port, the 8080 port. So I actually can only run one instance at a time. If you want, you can change the ports and be able to run multiple instances. I know Batter works that way a lot, right, Batter? With multiple ports, so you can have multiple Jasper instances running at the same time. But in case you only have one, if you try to start a second one, you'll get the error pretty much right away saying that the address is already
used. And it's very common in the production environment to have a proxy in front of your Jasper server. So proxy can also do this. So you can forward your request to the new 8.1 and keep the 8.0 run are up and running, but not accessible for the end users.
Okay, so now we've done that import. Let's go test it and see. So I'm going to go ahead and re-log in to my Jasper server now that I bounced the server, and should get logged in here to the home page. There it is. And while this first thing I'm going to check is my about, and you see here I'm using 8.1.1. And I'm going to notice my recent items are gone because I never ran this report in this instance. So I'm just going to go to my list of my reports here, search for Dr. Jaspersoft, and there it is, Dr. Jaspersoft report 8.803. So I'm going to go ahead and run that guy, and we'll make sure we see the same thing we saw when we had 803 running. And there it is, same report with the names and some of the salaries. So that is basically it. We go back to our steps. We showed the upgraded application. I probably should have had one in here of start 811. And it's never a bad idea to keep updating your plan and maybe put this into a document, because the same basic process will apply for every subsequent upgrade. And it's really nice to have that handy when you upgrade. And I think that's a good segue, unless you want to say something else. Go ahead, Batter.
Yeah, so here we made sure that we upgraded our server to, and we upgraded our resources, the repositories, the folders, users, and all of that in our new 8.11, but we still didn't do the customization. So if you have customizations in place at that time, where Mike was showing you the 8.1, up and running, now you're good. You go to the next step and you add your customizations to the 8.1 and adapt them if they need to be adapted. That's right. Restart the server again.
That's right. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about some tips and tricks, just basic things. We already mentioned this first one, I think, a little bit, but it's really important to mention, especially when you have customizations in place. And most of our clients, especially those that work with us in customer success, have some sort of customizations in place. So we really encourage people to make sure they always keep track of all customizations, any files you've modified on the server, if you've modified Java files, and which means new jar files, or class files, if you have JSP changes, JavaScript changes, XML changes, property files. There are so many different things and ways you can kind of customize our system. Even themes, if you have a custom theme, make sure you keep track of that. That's not stored on the server. It's in the UI of the application. I mean, technically it's in your database. So any UI changes as well, you want to make sure you keep track of all of these things, right? At a minimum, what I recommend, and I know everyone's got their own sort of preferences here, one easy way to do it is to, anytime you're going to customize a file in Jaspersoft, back up the original file, rename it, copy it to something with a name of .backup or .original or with the date or whatever you want before modifying the other file, and keep that even in the same location on the server. Then you can always do a sort based on dates and see what files had actually changed. If someone else comes in, months, years, decades later, because it does happen, where there's a whole different set of people in place and they don't know what was changed on the server. Secondary to that, and I didn't put a note here for this, but I would try to add a comment anytime you customize a file. Put something, some key word or something that maybe the company name, whatever it is that you customized those files. I just think that's really, really important to stress. And it makes life just so much easier when you upgrade if you have a list of all the things you've customized before. We did mention this before. Make sure you use the same user to perform your upgrades and installations that were used in your previous versions. It's not totally required, but you got to double check that it's consistent enough that it works, so that, like Bader mentioned earlier, your permissions are dealt with and everyone has access. The user running the application has access to all the files they need access to. I think it should go without saying, but I put it down here nonetheless. Test thoroughly and often throughout your upgrade process. Any opportunity you have to test something, test it. You want to get all the way to the end and then start testing and realize that maybe it was step one that you messed something up and now you have to go repeat all those steps. So test often. And then a shameless plug for us here in customer success, utilize us if you have an upshift plan. Very often we have even customers who have upshift plans with us and they don't call us and they try to do the upgrades themselves for whatever reason. And then, they have difficulties and reach out to us after the fact, and it's a little more difficult in that case. So, and then, did I mention that you should back up your database and install directories? Because if I didn't, you should back up your database and install directories, please, before starting any upgrade procedures. Did I miss anything, Bader? Are there any other tips you can think of that I don't have on this slide?
It looks good there. Yeah, I think you went through it all. All
right. Well, as usual, we have our resources here. Again, if you have questions, please ask those questions in the comments. Hopefully, we got your questions answered. But if not, you can always reach out to us here. There's our wiki page here. You can actually post questions to the Jaspersoft community, and we'll get your questions there. You can email us as well. We've got a couple links in here from today's presentation, the upgrade guide, of course, and our long-term release plan and model. So that's there. And then, of course, our email address is here. Bader, I think that's all I have. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. That was a really great and rich presentation. Thank you so much, Mike, to talk about this really important topic about Jaspersoft. So guys, remember, this is streamed in YouTube, so the recording will go in our channel right after our stream, and we're gonna add those slides in the Dr. Jaspersoft community page, and you can go and download them from there, and we will be updating that same page with the new session for May 11th. So you can go ahead and register for reminders, put your name, emails there, so you can get reminders, weekly reminders, and day before reminders. So here you go, you have our emails. You can go and shoot us an email and put in the topic, put in the subject, the topic of our Dr. Jaspersoft session, and we'll try to answer you as fast as we can. And thank you guys, thank you everyone. Hope we were able to answer all of your questions, and hope this was very helpful for you. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Hey, yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.